low-key trades that really set them up where they are now with Embiid, Simmons, and Butler.
Yeah, I mean, I think the moves that Hinkie made when he was GM are really what did set them up, and they really did. It started the process, and as we can see, the process ended up panning out, even though the 76ers struck out on a few of those draft picks, right, with, Jahlil Okafor and Nerlens Noel, with there being better players that they could have chosen. I do think that the argument can be made that since Hinkie has been gone, the trades have been made have been really questionable. You mentioned, of course, the biggest blunder, which was that Markelle Fultz Jason Tatum trade. Now, of course, I mean, the story out there is that almost anyone would have made that trade. Well, I know one team or one person that did not and would not make that trade, and that's, of course, Danny Ainge, who did work out Markelle Fultz, who everyone thought Boston's going to take him, but eventually, once closer to the draft, he's like, no, we actually want Jason Tatum, and they ended up benefiting from that trade. I also don't like, for at least where the 76ers are now, I don't like that Mikal Bridges deal. Now, I could turn out to be wrong with this because that 2021 pick can pan out to be something really good. And also, Zaire Smith, we don't know what's going to happen with him. But I do think for now, Mikal Bridges is the type of player that the 76ers team would really benefit from having. They need another wing. They need a wing who can extend the floor. And since we do see that the Philadelphia 76ers are in win-now mode, having Mikal Bridges there instead of a future 21 pick would really be beneficial for this team. But again, when Hinkie was there, I do agree with those trades being very smart and doing the right things, getting players, maximizing them, and then trading them away as they could for whatever they can get.
Yeah. Moving on to the fourth worst team that has shaped themselves in the negative way, shaped the roster in a negative way, is the Minnesota Timberwolves, number 4. Basically, starting since 2013, I mean, in June 27, 2013, which was draft day, they traded away their 2 first-round picks that year, actually, in Trey Burke and Andre Robinson for pennies to the dollar again. I mean, Gorgui Dieng was something that they returned, which obviously now is even a worse value. I mean, he had one good year, I believe, but now he has a worse value, a negative value as compared to a positive value, which I could add in as a key detail here. But yeah, they traded away Trey Burke and Andre Robinson, both solid rotational players. Nothing more, but again, these are two players that they could use in their rotation, that they could have used in their rotation. They also, for a smaller deal, they traded away a fairly young Thaddeus Young back in 2015. They traded away the first-round pick that later became Kevin Huerter for Adrian Payne, who hasn't done anything in the league since. And 2 of the bigger trades that they've really screwed up on in the last 4 to 5 years has been obviously trading for Anthony Bennett and Andrew Wiggins, trading Kevin Love away from him back in 2014. And then the Jimmy Butler trade they made where they traded away Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine, and Lauri Markkanen for a player that they essentially lost a year later. I mean, like I said, it was essentially Chris Dunn, LaVine, and Markkanen for Covington and Saric. I'll take the first 3 players, especially on a young team like Minnesota, any day of the week over Covington and Saric. So a pretty big blunder by Minnesota. I mean, it looked obviously like a steal back then, but we have the advantage of looking at this in retrospect and having 2020 vision here, basically looking back. And that's how we're judging this list. That's how we set this list up. So,
yeah, I mean, obviously the Minnesota Timberwolves, made some mistakes. It'd be nice to see a pairing of Karl-Anthony Towns and Lauri Markkanen. The Wiggins, the Kevin Love. The question is, what else could have they gotten for Kevin Love? Now, I mean, coming in, everyone thought Andrew Wiggins was going to be a very good player, but of course, we now know that he is, not very good. He's negative on the floor, and then also he has a lot of money. He's getting paid a lot of money, which was another mistake that Minnesota made that had nothing to do with trades. But again, it'd be interesting to see what Kevin Love, what else they were going to get. I remember there were rumors that him and Thompson would be swapped. Now, of course, Steve Kerr did not want to do that deal, but if you can get a player like, if you could even entertain the idea of getting a player like Klay Thompson for Kevin Love, there would probably be other teams who were willing to give up a little bit more for Kevin Love than what they ended up getting in return. Now, the Butler deal is another deal that, of course, you make at the time, it just didn't pan out. That team was just too young for Jimmy Butler. That's kind of the problem that happened there. So we see how it is now. The team could have been in better shape, but unfortunately they are not. Luckily, they still have Karl Anthony Towns, which it's something good to have at least.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, we have the advantage of hindsight here, which is fantastic, and that's. I mean, as good as those trades looked at the time, I mean, maybe the Kevin Love trade didn't look so good, but it was inevitable and that it was going to happen because he was unhappy there. They got a first round. I mean, they got two first picks. Obviously, one was after being a huge bust. So essentially, it was Wiggins for Kevin Love. But yeah, I mean, it didn't work out. It hasn't panned out for them, so we could judge them based off of that. So we could move on to number 3 on the teams that have shaped themselves in a positive way. Number 3 on that list is the Utah Jazz, who, I mean, really kind of starting, I guess, with the Deron Williams trade, where they traded Deron Williams in return for a first-round pick in 2013, which later became Gorgui Dieng. 2011 first-round pick, which was Enes Kanter and Derek Favors, and Devin Harris was in this deal, probably more as a salary filler back in the time. But, I mean, Favors is still on the roster, still a solid player. Nothing better than a solid starter. But, you know what, he is a starter in the league. Deron Williams hasn't done much. I mean, he played well for New Jersey back then, Brooklyn now. I believe it was New Jersey back then, right?
It was New Jersey.
Yeah, New Jersey back then, Brooklyn now. He had a few good years, but really, as young as he was, he died off real quick and hasn't come back since. So, looks like right now, it looks like the Utah are in better shape as of right now due to this trade. Another deal that they made was obviously the two bigger deals, I should say, were grabbing Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert from the Denver Nuggets on draft day. Both were very solid steals by the Utah Jazz. Getting themselves Kyle Korver for 2 second-round picks. We don't know how that trade is going to work out yet, but it is something there. Ricky Rubio was picked up in a trade for a first-round pick. That pick later became Josh Okogie. Again, we'll see how Josh Okogie pans out, but as of right now, Ricky Rubio is on the Jazz. Not playing as well as he probably did last year, but again, last year was a successful year for them, so that could still be counted. But essentially, yeah, the two biggest trades that got him on this list was from the Denver Nuggets, in which they received Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, two still very young players, and they look to be like the building blocks of the future for the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can trade for the talents of Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, then you can say that's a really good trade. Good job by the Utah Jazz. The other trades are, minor deals. I mean, obviously you give up Deron Williams, who was an all-star, but you are right. He very quickly faded away and stopped producing in the NBA. So it was a good time to get rid of him. They didn't overextend him. They didn't pay him extra money that they didn't have to. And they also set themselves up well with cap space for next year. Now, the problem has always been that it's hard to get players to come to Utah. But, hopefully they can get something and they can build on these successful trades that they have made.
Yes, exactly. So moving on to the third worst team that has shaped their roster in a negative way, I have the Sacramento Kings, who, before this year, have not had a good season in a long time, probably about 7-8 years. Just a lot of questionable trades that they've completed. Back in 2010, they traded away a young Kevin Martin who was averaging about 24, 25 points a game for really nothing that has panned out since then. They traded away. Actually, this is really a lot of research here, but in 2013, they had the second-round pick that later became Malcolm Brogdon. They actually received it, and then they traded it right back to Milwaukee. But it's a minor thing there. Obviously, who knows if Sacramento would have chosen Malcolm Brogdon, but they did have that second-round pick that later became Malcolm Brogdon. Then they traded away in 2014. They had Isaiah Thomas, who they traded away for a player named Alex Oriaki and a trade exception, which is an absolute joke. Um, and I've never heard of him. I don't know who that player is. So, yeah. They traded away. Actually, they traded away the pick. I mean, the pick that they received in this deal with Philadelphia was the Aaron Fox, but they did trade away a 2017 and a 2019 first round pick in a salary dump move. I remember this trade actually when it went down. They traded away Landry Stauskas and Jason Thompson for 2 first round picks. One was actually a swap, and that was actually the pick that Philadelphia later used to trade for Markelle Fultz. It was essentially Sacramento would have had the number 3 pick. Philadelphia would have had the number 5 pick, but because they had an opportunity to swap picks, obviously Philly took advantage of that, moved up 2 spots. Sacramento could have had Jason Tatum, basically, is what I'm saying, because who knows if they would have traded to receive Markelle Fultz. Who knows if that same trade would have gone down. So essentially Sacramento could have Jason Tatum, and obviously they don't have the 2019 first round pick now because of this deal, which was essentially a salary dump move at the time. Obviously with that number 5 pick, they took De'Aaron Fox last year, so that's how he's involved in this deal. They also traded away Tyreke Evans. I mean, he had a great rookie year for them. After that, dropped off a little bit, but he's another player that they could have kept. And really, I mean, he's developed into a very solid rotational player now, a player who could hit the 3-pointer, who still distributes the ball fairly well, rebounds well for a guard. I mean, a solid starter in the league. And that's somebody they also could have had. And obviously, trading away DeMarcus Cousins for essentially what is now Buddy Hield and a 2017 first-round pick, which then they later traded to get Harry Giles and Justin Jackson. However, that pick ends up being Zach Collins. So essentially, in the draft day 2017, they traded away Zach Collins for Harry Giles and Justin Jackson. We'll see what that trade becomes because we don't know how Harry Giles is going to play. But right now, Zach Collins looks like the better player than both Giles and Jackson. So essentially, that original trade I mentioned, DeMarcus Cousins, was essentially, as of right now, for Buddy Hield because he's the only one that's producing out of the players they received from that trade.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what was out there for DeMarcus Cousins. I do like how Buddy Hield is playing with De'Aaron Fox right now, so I'm not gonna totally argue that that's a bad trade because I do think it's a pretty good fit. And I think Buddy Hield is becoming a better player. I mean, he was, I believe, chosen number 2. I could be wrong there.
I think he was a little lower, yeah, like number 5 or 6.
Okay, but he was definitely considered the second best player in the college of that year, at least, behind Ben Simmons. Now, the other trades, these are minor players who, Sacramento was one of those teams that are really bad, so I don't necessarily have to say that trading away a Tyreke Evans when you're really bad is a bad thing if you can get something for him. Now, Kevin Martin was, he was big stats on a bad team. I'm not necessarily very impressed. I wasn't very impressed by him because when he was traded away to Houston, I mean, again, bad stats, bad team, and then traded again to the Thunder. He didn't produce with the Thunder at all. So, I mean, yeah, they made these deals. They didn't get much in return. I think there's been a lot of structural problems that happened in Sacramento that really led them to becoming this bad team. But hopefully, it seems like those days might be in the past and they might be a little bit better now. Again, I do believe they made a terrible, terrible mistake by taking Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic. And even you could make an argument that Jaren Jackson Jr. is a much better player for the NBA. But that's not trades. That's them drafting, which has been another problem for Sacramento in the past few years.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, the trade where they essentially traded away Zach Collins for Giles and Jackson, it looks like Portland got a steal out of that. And even when they traded away, like I mentioned earlier with the trade with Phoenix, where they picked up Skal Labissiere and Georgios Papagiannis, I mean, at least in that trade, also they picked up those two players.
They got the best player in the deal.
They got the best player in the deal right now. Yes, so that was actually a solid trade. But again,
I think we could say Marquise Chris is never going to be better than.
Well, yeah, no, definitely. But what I'm referring to more of the way they drafted. I know you brought that up right now, and I'm referring to the way they drafted because those two